Hi, I'm Sarah Zinger, and I'm an engineer here at Grafana Labs, and I'm going to tell you about 3 data source plugins to add to your stack after this talk. I'm not sure we're going to have time for questions, but if we don't, just come find me at the Ask the Experts booth after this talk. OK, so this is a lightning talk, so we're just going to jump right into it. Number 1 on my list today is the GitHub data source plugin. Or if you're not using GitHub, you might want to check out the plugins for GitLab, Versal, Netlify, Drone, or whatever you're using that can help you track deployments. So why might you be interested in the GitHub data source plugin? Well, there's lots of cool things you could do. For example, you could use the plugin to view your contributing stats over time on a Grafana dashboard, which, OK, is maybe not terribly useful, but kind of fun. Or maybe you want to wrangle your team's tech debt, and you want to fire off an alert every time your open issues count raises above a certain threshold. Or maybe you want to correlate code changes with downtime by using the annotations feature to mark every new pull request that has been merged. Let's dig into how to set up this last example. Basically, it takes 3 steps. You install the plugin, configure a plugin instance, and then create an annotation. Installing the plugin is super easy. You just go to the connections page, search for the GitHub data source, and click the install button. It should take less than a minute or so to install, and you know you're ready to go when you see the Add a New Data Source button. After you've clicked it, we need to configure this new data source instance with our GitHub information. We can do so with either a GitHub personal access token or a GitHub app, either of which should be pretty easy to access from your GitHub developer settings. Next, we'll pick the dashboard that we want annotations for, and we'll go to the settings page and select the Annotations tab. From there, we'll select the GitHub data source instance we just created. And now, using the query editor on the annotations page, we'll make a query to GitHub for the pull requests we want to see annotated on our dashboard. In my example here, I selected all pull requests that have emerged in my project with my project name in the title for the Grafana repo in the Grafana org. Now on my dashboard, I can see these little dotted lines marking every merge on GitHub that matched my query. When I hover over those lines, I get a title of the pull request and a URL to the PR. By pairing this with existing metrics, I can see I shipped a bug earlier that seems to have caused some errors. But after the next PR, everything seems to look better. Looks like my bug fix worked. Yeah, always good when the bug fix worked. All right. Next up on my list of cool data sources to install after this talk is Amazon Athena, or really any plugin that would let you monitor your particular cloud provider's costs. So why Athena? Well, Athena lets you write SQL queries against data stored in S3. So it's very flexible and powerful. There's lots you could do with it. For example, a lot of folks like to use Athena to query their logs with SQL. Querying logs with SQL is often just easier. Or maybe your organization has a business intelligence team, and they have a bunch of different user tracking data files and CSVs, and they're trying to put them all in one space, and ideally next to their other observability data, so they can make analysis to see how does downtime affect things like user retention. Or you could do what we'll show today, which is to monitor all of your AWS cloud costs with just one click. That sounds pretty nifty. Let's take a look at how to do it. So how is going to feel pretty familiar. We need to install the plugin, configure an instance. But this time, rather than make an annotation, we'll import a dashboard that comes pre-bundled with the plugin. Again, we'll go to the connections page, search for our plugin, and click Install. And then we'll create a new instance. From there, we can configure this data source instance with our AWS credentials. We need to make sure that whatever credentials we use has the right permissions to view and query Athena in AWS. We'll also need to make sure that we've configured our cost and usage reports to get sent to Athena. Here's a QR code to the docs from AWS if you're interested in learning more about how to do that. Finally, the fun part. On the configuration page of our Grafana plugin instance, we'll click on the Dashboards tab. From there, we can see we have 2 dashboards that come pre-bundled with the plugin. All we have to do is import the cost and usage report dashboard. And boom, we can see all of our AWS costs across all of our services and regions without having to manually write any queries ourselves. OK, last but definitely not least, the Infinity plugin. The Infinity plugin lets you query all kinds of APIs on the web in almost any format. It requires a little bit of configuration on our end to inform the plugin on the shape of our data, and then in exchange, it lets us connect to almost anything on the web. So what could you do with the Infinity plugin? More like, what can't you do with the Infinity plugin? If you're new to Grafana, it's a great way to connect to data fast and start building an understanding of Grafana's features. You can start by playing around with a public API that maybe you're already familiar with, thinking like weather data or something simple like that. Or you might consider using it to connect with some custom bespoke API that just your organization uses that will never really make a data source for. But you can still see that data alongside all your other Grafana data. Or maybe you're like me, and one day you just kind of got fixated on a very weird question of how hard would it be to see a live screenshot of the website that you're working on a Grafana dashboard? And the answer is it's pretty easy with the Infinity plugin. Let's take a look at how to do that. Well, again, we just install the plugin, configure a new instance, and then this time we'll create a query variable that we'll use in a panel. And actually, depending on your setup and version of Grafana, you may not even need to install the plugin, as these days it's getting pre-installed. But if it's not, just search for it in the connections page. Same deal as before. OK, next we're going to configure it with a base URL for the main endpoint of Google's PageSpeed Insights API, which is a really cool API. It contains all kinds of interesting data about page speed, performance, accessibility, and by the way, it takes a screenshot. It happens to, so we're going to put in our configuration process a query parameter for our API key, as well as a URL for the website that we're trying to take a screenshot of. So next we'll go to an existing dashboard, and we'll click the settings, and we'll find the variables tab. From there, we'll create a new variable and ensure that the type of the variable is a query, and we'll give it a name, in this case, screenshot, and we'll select our Infinity instance. So now we're defining the query for this variable. In this case, we want to select a property off of the JSON response that we get back from the PageSpeed API that contains a base64 encoded string representing a screenshot of our website. And now that we have that string stored in a variable, we can use it as a source attribute for an HTML tag that we specify as content in Grafana's text visualization panel. Once we've done that, we should see our screenshot rendered. Here you can see a nice picture of a website I'm working on for my mom's garden club. By the way, hi, Mom. And here we go. Here it is in a dashboard. So why would anyone do this? Well, mostly I just think it's fun. But I also think having screenshots of the websites that you're working on could be a really great way to gain context quickly of the dashboard that you're looking at, especially during an incident when you might have many tabs open, working on many different websites. And of course, the PageSpeed Insights API is not really even about screenshots. It's just kind of a fun side effect. It also has a lot of really, really wonderful information about things like web accessibility. So you can see below the screenshot here, I have some accessibility audits. And here you can see in red that I have a problem with some color contrast. So that's something for me to go work on so that my website is viewable for as wide an audience as possible. Well, that covers the 3 plugins from this talk, but that's far from the only interesting data source plugins. Probably not even the most interesting use cases out there for the ones that I showed. Last I checked, we have 159 data source plugins in our catalog, but we have more and more every day, as you've heard announced recently. If there's one takeaway from this lightning talk, it's that the big tent here at Grafana is even bigger than you think. It's not just about supporting the common solutions for metrics, logs, and traces, et cetera. It's about bringing all of your data into one place to paint as big a picture as possible of how your application is doing, including deployments, cloud costs, web accessibility, and a lot more. And also, don't sleep on some of our more advanced features that work with data sources, like annotations, bundled dashboards, and variables. They can make all the difference. And if for some reason we're missing a data source here, please submit it to our catalog. And also, I just wanted to give a big shout out to all the contributors, both inside of Grafana and also outside of Grafana, all over the world, who make these data sources possible. Definitely, thank you so much. And submit your bug requests and feature requests and documentation fixes. This is a great community effort. OK, that's it. Thank you.